If you've been following my journey, you'll know that I purchased a commercial space here in the hill country of Texas.
I want to say a big thank you to Simply Safe for sponsoring this video.
In the backyard area, there's a small grove of live oaks, and at the time there was a worn out tree house spanning across some of them. I tore it down almost immediately, but then started on building the 700 square foot floating deck that uses only the surrounding trees to support it. This is a massive undertaking that was most certainly among my favorite of all time builds. So let me start at the beginning and explain the process.
The first thing I need to mention is this took months of planning. Jacob, who is the lead carpenter on this build, does have a background in building tree houses, but still, we ran the plans through several engineers, had the tree inspected by an arborist, and Jacob even did a very detailed 3D model of the entire structure and the trees. When building in the trees, it is important to remember that they are living, growing, moving things, so you have to allow for their movement, or you can end up damaging the tree and having a failing structure. There are these special bolts called tabs, tree attachment bolts, that are massive and specially designed to build in the trees. Each one of these is rated at 10,000 pounds, which is absolutely nuts to me. This threaded portion here will be inserted into the tree until half of the boss, which is this portion here, is buried in the trunk. Then the deck will be resting on this portion of the bolt, which will be sticking out. In order to get a level deck, all of these tabs need to be drilled on the same plane. However, getting a level line on all of these different trees was kind of a problem. But Jake showed me a new trick for it called a water level. It's a very simple tool made from a clear flexible hose with water in it. Then it works on the principle that water will always find its own level, regardless if the ends of the tube are touching or 50 feet apart. To use the tool, I would hold my end of the tube still at the starting elevation. Then Jake would move his end of the tube to transfer that elevation to the next tree. After repeating on the other trees and getting the tab locations marked, we started pre-drilling. The tabs need about 8.5 inches of depth, so we made a mark on the auger to have a visual on the progress. The important thing to pay attention to on this step is that we are going in straight, not only square to the tree, but also keeping the bit level. To check for square, one of us would hold a square to give the driller a visual reference on the left and right position of the drill. Then to check for level, we would stop every little bit, throw a level up on the auger, and make sure the up and down position was also good. Once the depth was reached, now the bit can be switched out to a different bit that will enlarge the outside of the hole and allow for the boss to nest into the tree. This bit looks like a Forstner bit, but has a long center pin that fits in the pre-drill that was just drilled, which helps keep the Forstner bit centered. Now, this step was incredibly challenging. We needed to go about 3.5 inches into the tree, and just to give you an idea on how tough it was, this one hole took 45 minutes. These live oaks are no joke. It is extremely hard. After getting it drilled though, now was to start inserting the tab into place. A few things here. We would sanitize the threads and anything else that would be coming in contact with the freshly drilled hole. It might be overkill, but it's an easy thing to do. Then when threading it in, it's again important that it goes in level. So after every few turns, we would throw a level on it. It's amazing just how quickly this gets too hard to turn by hand. So we added in some leverage by attaching a pipe wrench to the tab. Then, when that wasn't enough, adding a cheater bar to the pipe wrench. This actually turned out to be everybody's favorite part of the process as we all took turns rotating the tab into place. Even Justin, the videographer, jumped in on the fun. His 6'4" frame definitely came in handy a few times.
Justin!
There were only 6 tabs, but it took us an entire day to get them all set. Something we ended up trying to make the drilling step go a little faster was to wrap a ratchet strap around the tree and the drill. Then, as Jake would hold the trigger and keep the drill bit straight, I would slowly tighten down on the ratchet, allowing it to assist in pushing the drill into the cut, instead of our shoulders or chests. And to give you an idea on how effective this was, the first 3 holes took us about 45 minutes apiece to drill, but the strap cut that time down to about 10 minutes. And it of course saved us from getting black and blue. If you've been following along, you've known that I've used Simply Safe for my shop security for a while now. It is incredibly effective, reliable home or shop security that will make sure your property is safe at a fair price of only 50 cents a day. I recently added Simply Safe to my new commercial shop as well, and I can relax knowing that my new shop and my tools are professionally monitored 24/7. And of course, if anything happens, they'll make sure the police are called. My most recent addition to my shop security is the new Simply Safe Smart Lock. I've added new employees this year, and this smart lock ensures any of them can get in without keys, as well as making sure the doors are locked when they leave. I can grant access remotely if necessary, and I can even set up unique access codes so I can get alerted as to exactly who is locking and unlocking the door. Just like all of the other Simply Safe devices, the lock is very reliable, sets up in a breeze, and is very easy to use. If you're ready to easily take control of your home or shop security system, then visit simplysafe.com/April to learn more. Big thank you to Simply Safe for keeping me and my shop safe. On to day 2. The objective for day 2 was to get all 3 beams set. One beam, the smallest up here on front, was the only one we were able to make ourselves. The other 2 had to be specially ordered and delivered. And it was actually really cool watching it all get delivered because the 2 beams showed up on their own truck and the driver was able to tilt his bed up and dump it directly on site. If you're in Texas and have timber needs, then I'll leave you a link to my contact in the description. We started by trying to set the backmost beam first, which is the second largest. It weighs 470 pounds and is around 24 feet long. The first obstacle was simply how to move such a heavy piece into place. It turns out we were able to wrap a few straps around it and use the power of all 3 of us to just drag it over. Next thing to figure out is now how to get it lifted 9 feet in the air. We were going to try a few chain hoists, but since I have a forklift, we decided to try that first, and it worked exceptionally well. Not only was it easy lifting, but the ability to side shift the forks and therefore the beam left and right was easy peasy. However, it's worth noting that Jake has lifted heavy items like this before with just the use of chain hoists. Okay, that went smoothly, but now it's on to the biggest beam. This one weighs 950 pounds and is 34 feet long. We actually tried the same method of just pulling it, but had no luck. So I went and grabbed another useful tool, a side-by-side. We strapped onto one side of the beam and used it to drag it forward. Once the tail passed the trees, I used the forklift to pick it up and bring it back into place. This way we could use the side-by-side once again to drag it into the grove of trees and thread it into place. Literally every step on this project was something like this. It was just something new to figure out. We would start off with the main objective of something. In this case, we needed to get this beam over and then up there. Then we just had to work out how to do that little by little until eventually our objective was met and we could look to repeating the process on the next challenge. After setting the 2 largest beams, setting the third was a piece of cake. To make the smallest one, we cut each beam to the same length and then laminated it together to make up a 3-layered beam. Even though it is heavy, Jake and I found it wasn't too heavy for us to simply lift it up and carry it over into place. Once all 3 beams were in place, now we could attach the unique hardware. Each beam has 2 tabs. At one end, there's a static arrangement, while the other end has a dynamic arrangement. The static will stay stationary, but the dynamic has a long slot that the tab goes through, which will allow movement room as the tree grows or moves. First 2 days and 2 major steps down. Now it was on to day 3, which was another tough one, setting the joist. The element that really makes this a tough job is that we need to get every single one 10 feet in the air. Also, because of our spans and load, every piece of material we're working with is not only huge, but also very heavy. We started the day off by looking at the plans and marking off where each joist needed to be located on the beams. And I cannot stress to you how incredibly valuable having a set of detailed plans was. Jake invested so much time perfecting things digitally in the 3D model where every angle, length, everything was accurate so that when we moved to the next step, he could easily call out the exact location or length or angle or answer to any other question posed. So one thing that made joist day so tough is the weight of everything and getting every board lifted up and moved into place. But another was that every joist required 2 different angles to be cut in on either end. Because I didn't want just a massive floating deck that was 9 feet in the air with no post going down to the ground. Oh no, I also wanted the deck to have curves, which meant the front of a joist could need an angle of 16.4 degrees, but the back might need an angle of 117 degrees. We worked out a system where Jacob would make all of the cuts on the joist on the ground. Then him and I would heft the joist up and onto the beams where David was stationed. From there, we would not only place the joist on its tick mark on the beam, but also make sure the overhang off of the beam was correct. There is a ton of blocking that's needed throughout the deck, not only in between each joist where each beam was, but also around the trees. So David and I would keep ourselves busy while Jake would be cutting the next joist by adding in the blocking. The blocking in between the joists prevents the joist from being able to roll. Then the blocking around the trees, of course, gives us framing members to attach to, while also giving the tree plenty of room to grow in the future. With these being live oak trees, we left about 7 inches of room on all sides of it. And just a tip, if you're working up high like this, we constantly would screw in temporary scraps on the underside of the joist to create a shelf to hold up the next board we would be putting in. And this way you don't have to hold it flush on top. The deck itself is divided in kind of 2 distinct sides with 3 joists laminated together being here. Day 3 was us setting these 3 joists together, then everything to the left side. Day 4, we all showed up kind of smoked, but ready to repeat the process to set the joist to the right side of the 3 joists. The second day of any process is of course easier in the sense that the system is figured out, the tools needed are set up, and a groove between team members is established, which is always a really great feeling for me. One unique thing we had to figure out on this right side of the deck was coming off at an angle from these 3 joists to the front beams. This was complicated because 1, the steep angles were a new challenge for Jacob to figure out how to cut with the circular saw. The problem is the blade can only be set so far over. He ended up making a jig that he could rest the shoe of the saw on to raise it up higher on one side and give him the additional angle needed. Then he would make 2 cuts in order to get the depth needed. The second thing to figure out was attaching them securely. We ended up cutting and placing these small blocks that have an angle cut in on one side. And this way, as the joist was placed in its needed location, we would have plenty of meat to attach it onto. Throughout the entire deck, we were using a combination of screws and nails, typically using nails to pin items into place and get them positioned, but then coming back with screws to squeeze things together. In some areas, like these angled joists, we would also come back with metal straps and bolts to reinforce the connection. Other hardware used was joist hangers on any joist not on a beam. And for these, we just grabbed standard hangers, but gave them a coat of black paint before installing them. After the angled joists were installed, we went back to tossing up, then installing the regular joists that spanned from the front beam to the back. It was so cool at this point to walk under the deck. Not only is it beautiful to look at, but it's also a crazy cool feeling to watch the progress as the day goes on. Also, on the front, it was spectacular to see the curves coming to life. You could actually walk under the front edge, looking up, and follow the bends that definitely give it a gracefulness, but added so much additional work. Day 5 started with another slightly unique system, sister joisting together in order to span from the center, the largest beam, to the frontmost beam, the smallest. This will make up the forwardmost area of the deck that will be the tightest radius, but create a very quaint and cozy viewing or seating option once the deck is complete. It's a funny thing to experience building a deck in the trees, because the more boards you throw up and attach, the more walking area you're giving yourself. To get to one point to the other, we would most often just balance beam across and stay up on top. But scaffolding and as many tall ladders as possible underneath was also a time saver. At this point, we were all 3 very tired. It's not only hard work, but it's also summer in Texas. I mean, thank goodness we had the wonderful shade of the trees themselves as we were building. But looking out over the deck from either the bottom side or the top side, it was extremely easy to feel proud and also excited by what we were doing. Now, of course, there is a lot more to go, but I've had to break this project into a few parts because there's just so much involved. In the next episode, I'll start right here and show you how we capped off and joined the tails of the joist to eventually create the stunning curves you see in the final deck. Stay tuned if you're interested in seeing it, and leave me a comment down below on what you think about it so far.
Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you would like another project to tackle, don't forget that I have templates for this folding Adirondack chair. Of course, it's an Adirondack chair, but then you can tuck it away into this nice sleek profile for either storing it during winter or just simply after a party. You can click right here to get your templates.